Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to the Lazy Dietitian, Lazy Ways to Track What You Eat. I am Bryla McNees, dietitian with the UK Health and Wellness Program, and I am the Lazy Dietitian. So, hello and welcome back to those of you who have been with us before. And for those of you who are new to our Lazy Dietitian series, it's great to have you here. Okay. Feel free to use the chat box if you like. I will be able to see those questions or comments as they come through today. So just go ahead and feel free to use that at any point. But I'm going to go ahead right now and share my screen and we will get started. Okay, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. All right, everybody's doing okay. You can hear me. Maybe I might feel better if somebody were able to put something in the chat box to let me know you can see me and hear me okay, but I'm going to assume that you can. Okay, great. Thank you, Amanda. I do appreciate that. All right. Well, let's get started. So, one of the most common questions I get asked by my clients who are interested in changing nutrition habits is, should I track what I eat? Okay. And maybe that's why you're here today because you are also curious about that. And the annoying answer is it depends. So today we'll talk about some reasons why you might consider tracking, but we'll also, more importantly, talk about different types of ways that you can track that hopefully will fit your personality, preferences, and lifestyle so that it doesn't feel like an overwhelming task to do. And that's why I call this lazy ways to track what you eat, because this does not have to be a overwhelming, very time consuming endeavor. And a lot of people feel that it is. And I want to be sure that we give you some options so that you don't feel that way if you do decide to track what you eat. Okay. So let's start with talking about what tracking can help you do. Okay. Tracking certainly can help you increase awareness around your eating habits, especially if you're trying to figure out what or how you're eating may be affecting certain symptoms you're having, such as maybe GI symptoms, maybe certain quality of life concerns, such as energy levels or moods or fitness goals, or health conditions such as maybe managing diabetes or blood pressure or cholesterol or some sort of nutritional deficiency. Okay, so tracking definitely helps with awareness, for connecting the dots between food and eating and any of those things. Okay? It's really hard in our day-to-day lives that are busy, to be able to kind of connect those dots mentally. So once we have a recording of what we're eating, when we're eating it, and any other kind of symptoms or information we might be looking for, that really can help us, like I say, connect some dots. Tracking also helps us bridge the gap between perception and reality. Um, what and how we actually eat is often different than how we think we eat. And I've seen this a lot with clients, and maybe some of you have had that experience if you've tracked your food intake for a little while. You may have had certain thoughts about how you were doing, and then you track, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize, I had this habit, or I ate this so infrequently, or didn't eat vegetables for a week, right? So it's easy to tell ourselves a lot of things about what we are or are not doing. But in reality, when we track it, sometimes it can tell us a little bit of a different story. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, some folks have a very firm grasp on the reality of what they're eating, and there are no surprises. But for a lot of people, there are. So it can be really helpful for that. Tracking can help you create a feedback loop for change, right? So it's hard to change something that you can't measure or describe or understand. We have to, have some ability to do that, to be able to know what we're trying to change, and what we want to change about it. And then finally, it provides some accountability, right? It's a way to be honest with yourself and ultimately accept responsibility for your actions in terms of what you're eating and how you're eating. Okay. And that sometimes could be the tough part. That could be um, a, a jagged pill to swallow, to be able to just be able to be that honest with yourself and accept responsibility for whatever it is that you find out is going on. But again, that's part of the journey. You got to start there to be able to start, sometimes making positive changes. So I think before people commit to any type of tracking, and we're going to look at those different types of tracking here in a moment, you want to ask yourself these three questions. Okay. Why do I want to track? You have to be able to answer that question. I mean, there are some people who just are curious, like maybe they don't really have any specific goals or concerns and they're just curious. But I find that most people, are most motivated to track when they have some specific reason for why, right? Like, geez, I'm always feeling very hungry around this time of day. Why is that? Or, geez, I notice when I'm testing my blood sugar, it's spiking around these times. How is that related to what or how I'm eating? I notice my energy levels are up and down throughout the day. How is food related to that? So you have to have some kind of why, I think, to start to guide your efforts. You also want to be clear about what you want to track. Okay. As you're going to see as we work through the options for how to track, you don't have to track every little thing about your eating. Um, to be able to have tracking be effective. Okay. And you'll see that. But you want to have some sense of like, what am I really trying to look at? Am I trying to look at the timing of what I'm eating? Am I trying to look at my, general carbohydrate intake or my fiber or my sodium intake? So and again, maybe you want to look at it more holistically and you're just more curious about all of it. But again, having some sense of what you're trying to track and why. And then finally, the how. And that's what we're going to look at today. All right. My guess is if I were to say, okay, what's the first thing that comes to mind of how you could track your food intake? Most people would say an app. I don't know. You guys can let me know in the chat if you think that's accurate or not. But that is, with my experience from clients, what they mostly say. Oh, you mean I got to use one of those apps, right? Um, oh yeah, I track with the Lose It app or the MyFitnessPal app, things like that. So again, I do feel like that is it's we're gonna talk about the pros and cons of tracking with an app, but it's not the only way, and we're gonna talk about other ways. Let's see. I am actually tracking using the Weight Watchers app and it has been very helpful. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, and a lot of these, I know there's a lot of like proprietary programs like Weight Watchers and Noom, and things like that that have their own apps and their own methods for tracking. But what I find interesting is that most of those kinds of programs have some way to track because we do know that it's very effective for a lot of people to create behavior change. So that's awesome. Keep up keep up the good work with that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of food tracking apps. They are easy to access generally because nowadays most everybody, including all the toddlers, seem to have a phone, right? So you always have your phone with you, and so it can be very accessible that way. It certainly can be educational. I feel like a lot of people who use them who just have no education, information about food find the apps helpful because they can like see a lot of nutrition information at one time and learn from that. So they'll like put in like, oh, I ate this bagel for breakfast. And, a common reaction might be, oh, wow, I ate that bagel for breakfast and I didn't realize it, you know, had all those carbs and wow, it had a lot more sodium than I would have thought. And, so you just start learning things. Or, oh, I ate a bowl of oatmeal and wow, I didn't know oatmeal could be such a good source of fiber. So people really do seem to start learning some things about food that maybe they didn't already know when they're using those apps. It does provide real-time feedback, of course, because you're looking at it in real time, hopefully, as you're consuming the food or right after you are. And, you can kind of see the tallies for different things, kind of accumulating throughout the day, and giving you that real-time status. I generally think, based on my experience, that apps work best for people who kind of gravitate towards numbers. There's people, I have some clients who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm like a Excel spreadsheet person," or I'm I have a lot of lists and, things like that, or who work with a lot of numbers and their brain just thrives in that. Okay. Maybe a really good fit for those kinds of folks. Okay. It also could be a really good fit for people who have very specific goals, right? Like if you are trying to track, like, again, carbohydrate intake if you have diabetes, or you're an athlete who's training and you're trying to make sure you're getting enough protein, or you're, you know, trying to watch your sodium intake. It can be really helpful for those kinds of specific goals. Okay. Food tracking apps, I think, are definitely not recommended for anyone who has a history of an eating disorder or disordered eating, or is currently feeling like they're dealing with that. Definitely not a good fit there. And part of the reason for that falls with the cons here we're going to look at. One of the main cons is that as time has gone on, a lot of these apps have transitioned to a like freemium pricing uh, schematic, where you can download the app for free, but you have to pay for popular premium features such as barcode scanning, for example, okay, or to be able to see certain types of reports, or to export the data or share it in a certain way. Okay. So that is, I think, as these apps have become more popular, there has been a lot more monetization of those features, unfortunately. So you may have to pay a little bit to get features that you really want. The data can be overwhelming. So again, if you are not a data numbers person, you're not an Excel spreadsheet guru, you might find the data very overwhelming. It's just like too much. Like it's just so there is so much data, there's so many numbers, and if you don't know what it means or what you should pay attention to, it can feel very overwhelming. All right. That's again where it might be helpful to have a very specific goal of what you're trying to look at in that data to start with. I think sometimes the apps can feel kind of judgy, is the word I would use. And again, for anyone who's used apps like that, maybe they give you a calorie goal for the day, and, as soon as you go 1 calorie over the goal, the numbers turn red, and it's like, oh, you're over your whatever for the day. And again, depending on the person, that can feel, yeah, judgmental, negative, make you feel bad, make you feel like you've, failed, right? Um, and so that just might not be the right fit for some people. It also can be pretty tedious to input that information. Now, again, there are a lot of features like the barcode scanning that you may have to pay for that helps with that. There's, of course, any food that people may eat at a restaurant, would a chain restaurant in particular would be in there. You can often like repeat things, or put a recipe in and then, repeat that the next time you have it, so you don't have to put it all in again. So there are some features that make it a little easier, but in my experience, for people who this is not a good fit for, or who are, just very busy and distracted with other things, it can feel tedious. And that's one of the, I think, the primary reasons people ultimately stop using them. Another reason a lot of people stop using them is that they feel that it is kind of maybe contributing to an unhealthy relationship with food. Now, again, this might be people who should not have been using them in the first place if they have a history of an eating disorder or disordered eating, like I said. But for some people who never even like really had issues with food, I hear some of those clients say it's still like, geez, it made me feel kind of obsessive with food, and start viewing some foods as like good or bad, or not eating certain healthy foods that I used to because it was just too many calories or something else, about the numbers that stop them. So I don't know. It can have very strange impacts, and kind of unintended negative impacts sometimes, in terms of behaviors and attitudes towards food. So, it's sometimes people feel like they lose like joy and enjoyment in food when they're just kind of like tracking it all the time, or they're worrying about it more, thinking more about food in an unhealthy way. So those would all be things to watch out for if you do use an app and you find that that's happening. I would say probably not a good fit for you. Okay, so those are the pros and cons. Really, I'm going to leave it there because you guys are, going to kind of take this and think about it, and decide if that might be something that is right for you to try. But I want to give you some other options too. Okay, um, that I think can be really helpful, especially if you are short on time or feeling kind of lazy, or feeling like I want to do this, but I don't want to devote a whole lot of extra time and mental energy to tracking. These are some great options. Okay, so a photo journal. This I definitely feel can be easier and less time consuming than a traditional food tracking app like the ones we were just talking about. Now, again, this may not be for everybody. If you are more of that numbers person, this might feel like pointless to you or not giving you helpful information. Um, I'm a visual person, and so I do find appeal in a journal like this. So I do think if you tend to be more of a visual, learner, or that's what has an impact with you, or what you tend to remember, then this might be a really good fit. Um, when smartphones first came out, I was a dietitian both before and after the advent of smartphones, so this gives me a little bit of a unique perspective. But as soon as the smartphones came out, people were already kind of using them on their own to keep like a photo journal. Um, because they just found like, oh, that's a pretty neat way to do it, to kind of keep a record of what you eat day to day, and maybe you create like your own little album or something in your smartphone, so it's the pictures go there, and you can go back and review them from time to time. This format is great if you don't want to focus on the numbers or feel like you might be or are overwhelmed by all the numbers I talked about being in those food tracking apps. It also could be helpful if, again, you are someone with some sort of history of disordered eating or being sensitive to that, that because the photojournals aren't going to have any kind of focus on numbers, right? Like calories and macros, it's much safer way to track in terms of those considerations. Okay. But I think some very entrepreneurial people in the tech world realized that people were using their phones on their own, to keep photo food journals. And so after a while, I started seeing apps created that were specifically for this purpose of keeping a photo journal. So I think that's really how popular this concept has gotten, that there are apps designed just for that now. I did try to do a little research to give you guys some starting points here if you're interested. This Food View one looks like a pretty solid choice, and it's completely free. See How You Eat. It's free to download. Again, the freemium, but it has in-app purchases. I'm not exactly sure, how many features are free or not. And then Eat Food Journal. This is actually a really popular one. It used to be free, I think, and now it's a paid app. You get a 7-day free trial. So if you're curious about it, maybe you can download Food View for free and give it a shot, because it does at least allow you to have like one place where it's organized, and you can, I think, do the photos like by day, and there's other prompts in there that you can put in about your eating and things like that. So that would be one alternative to try. Okay. Another alternative would be, as I say to my clients, to kick it old school. Like I just said, I was a dietitian for a while before smartphones were invented, which was around 2007. I was a dietitian before that. So I remember having clients prior to that do paper food journals, right? Or even food journals on an electronic document on the computer, like a Word doc or an Excel file. Uh, what I remind my clients of is this: we had a lot of evidence-based research on food journaling prior to the advent of smartphones, for decades before that. And that research told us food journaling was effective, okay, before smartphones were ever invented. So I think for people to hear that is really helpful because again, they just feel like, oh, well, everyone tracks on an app now and that's what I should do. No, you don't have to do that. And the preponderance of evidence we have about the effectiveness of food journaling in changing your eating habits was all assimilated prior to apps ever being a thing. Okay? So just really I want people to keep that in mind. This way can be effective. Um if I were to keep a food journal and the times I have in the past, I still go this way. Like, even though I love technology and my phone and all of that, I'm just like I said, I think partly because I'm a visual person, I do get overwhelmed by too many numbers. Um, the photo thing, the old school journal like this, I know these are the better fit for me. All right. And so everybody has to make that determination on their own. So you could track what you eat on, paper, in a notebook, like say an electronic document. Some people kind of merge the technology with the old school way and just like keep record of what they're eating on the notes app on their phone, right? Or just a file on your phone. So it's still a way to kind of have that phone accessible. In the journal on there, easy to access, but you're still doing it like without an app. So that's kind of a nice compromise as well. If you were to kick it old school, you can keep it really simple. I find that all you really need to record for a journal to be effective is the time of day you ate, what you ate or drank, and the approximate amount. Again, you do not have to be necessarily weighing and measure everything unless that's somehow important to whatever goal you're trying to achieve. But to the best that you can, approximating about how much. That's enough. Okay. To be able if you had a week or 2 of that information and were able to reflect on it and review it, you would get a lot of helpful information from that, okay? I guarantee you. So, that would be a really great place to start. Another alternative would be to just track specific habits, like I said, there's some people who maybe are just trying to figure out how much protein they're eating or carbohydrates or sugar or sodium, um So if you already have a sense of what specific areas you want to track or nutrients, you can just track those on your own. A lot of people feel like they don't need an app to do that. Like they can just look up like Google what foods they eat and see, how much, if they're just tracking carbs, look up the carb amount of those foods and keep track of it that way during the day, right? They don't even need an app to do those kinds of number oriented things, right? So you could choose to just track one or maybe two nutrients of concern to you. You could also track just, more of just habits as well. So something like drinking water. This is a, popular goal for a lot of people. I know I want to drink more water, right? So maybe you just track your water intake. Eating more fruits and vegetables. That's a goal. Maybe you just track that. Snacking habits. I This idea was new to me um, when I came across a client several years ago who told me, I think my meals are fine. I don't have any concern about really what I'm eating with my meals. I just really sense that it's my snacking that's the issue. And so she had decided on her own. And again, this was new to me at the time. And I thank her for this idea. She's like, I'm just going to track my snacks. That's what she did, and that's all she really needed to do, and it was doable, and it was effective for her, so that's where I ever first got this idea, so I think it's great, and I've seen it work. Um, Maybe you wanna track, like, portion sizes, maybe you just track, like, hunger and fullness throughout the day to give you a sense of, like, are there meals where I'm not eating enough or I'm eating too much? Maybe your timing. For a lot of people, that is an issue. Maybe what they're actually eating and how much looks pretty good, but maybe the timing is a little off. Emotional eating, too, of course, this can be really helpful, right? If you're just wanting to track, like, geez, I'm eating when I'm not hungry because of some emotion, like I'm bored or I'm stressed or whatever. You could just track that as well. Okay. Um, and there may be several specific habits you want to change. But you could just do them one at a time. So, all right, maybe there's two or three things on this list that you would like to change. Maybe just focus on one at a time and just track the one at a time. That is a really simple, accessible way to get started with tracking. Okay. And then if you want to expand from there and track more things or track in a little bit more sophisticated or comprehensive way, you certainly could. But I think this is very accessible to most people. Or your final option is don't track your food intake at all. This also came from a client many, many years ago who told me she was just keeping like a non-food journal. I think she also called it like a non-scale journal. Like she was trying to try like she was trying to lose weight, but she was trying to focus on like the things she knew she was doing that were just helping her overall health through nutrition and food. So she just kept like a journal, just like somebody would keep like a daily journal of what happened today, how did I feel about it, or things like that. But it's more related to food and eating. So maybe you just write down at the end of the day like a quick summary of like, okay, what did I feel good about today? What was a challenge today? Um, Geez, what I learn or observe that I want to remember, maybe ideas for down the road, next steps I might want to take, um, and anything else that you might find relevant, right? But the reason this can be effective too, and the reason any of the tracking is effective is because it gives you some space to think. I think that in reflect, I think that is one of the primary benefits of doing any tracking. It's more about making kind of that mental time and space to just stop and think and reflect on what you're doing. And so it doesn't really matter if you have an app full of numbers to do that or you have a journal where you're just writing a few things down at the end of the day. It's all leading to that same thing to help you increase your awareness and mindfulness around your food intake. Okay. So maybe you keep this, non-food journal and you're like, oh, today at lunch I had a success because in my mind, because I ordered a salad instead of the French fries on the side, or, geez, this ongoing challenge is my coworker who loves to bake and they keep bringing all these things into the office and I don't know how to say no. And, maybe you can brainstorm some ways to handle that in your journal. Oh, maybe I noticed that when I don't get a good night's sleep, I feel like it's harder to, eat the way that I intend. All right. So, it's a lot of ways you could leverage this. And again, it's all about just taking a moment to stop, try to assess what's going on, and reflect on it for how you might change things going forward. Okay. All right. And then finally, just a little tracking checklist. So I'd say if you, um, do decide to start tracking, okay, um, these are some things I would just kind of be asking yourself throughout that process. Is this way of tracking the right fit for me? Like we talked about, there's a lot of different options here, and I tried to point out where I find that maybe they are fit or not for people, but everybody's got to make that decision on their own, and that can only come from trying. So maybe you're like, yeah, I think, well, the app would be a good fit for me. I'm going to try it, but you have to still constantly ask yourself, like, does this feel like the right fit for me, or does this just feel like too hard or too tedious or overwhelming? Okay. So just being sure you're kind of checking in with yourself about that. And if it's not the right fit, move to one of the other strategies. How am I using the information to help me? So again, it's not really just enough to track something. You have to be reflecting on it, assimilating the information, making sense out of it, right? To be able to use it to make changes going forward, right? That's the whole point of this. Okay. So how are you doing that? Are you making time regularly to kind of reflect on it and strategize for next steps? And finally, do you need to take a break or make a change? Right? Again, like I said, I think a lot of people just think it sneaks up on them, that point where they're like, oh, I can't track anymore. I'm just done, right? Like I'm burnt out. So you want to try to anticipate that before you're just totally burnt out. But when you sense like, this is feeling kind of forced, or I'm doing it less and less often, maybe it means you need to take a break for a little while. Maybe it means you need to change to a different format of tracking. Um, I also will point out too, as my final point today, is that I don't necessarily think tracking needs to be a forever thing and probably shouldn't be. Like I said, we want to be using it for fairly specific purposes. Okay. And once kind of that is accomplished, hopefully we've built some habits that keep that going without kind of the need to track. So I really just think it's a tool as you're trying to make the changes. And hopefully, the goal is you can sustain those changes without the tracking after the fact. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to stick around here for a moment or two. If anybody has any questions or comments in the chat box, I'm happy to address those. I will send out the PDF and video recording of this so that you have it, and we'll also be posting it on our YouTube channel. And we have another session that we'll have ready to go next month in February. Actually, let me double check the date of that. It is February 20th. We'll do 2:30 again, and we're going to talk about lazy ways to read food labels. So again, another thing that feels overwhelming for people often, and time consuming and tedious, and I'm going to try to simplify that process for you. Oh, thanks, Cindy. All right. Thanks again to everyone for being here. And always feel free to reach out to me by email if there's anything I can help you with. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.